Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Koepp, co-founder and chief content officer of From Day One, our forum on corporate values. Welcome to our webinar today. We're excited about an important topic we have for you, which is focusing on skills rather than jobs to meet future workforce needs. And we have an all-star panel with us today to talk about it. Before we get started, though, From Day One has partnered with AARP to develop a family caregiving survey to collect data about how employers are supporting workers with family caregiving responsibilities. We invite you to complete that survey. I'll put a link in the chat space right now. We also have a special promotion for today's attendees. One of our monthly virtual conferences is coming up next week on November 9th. That conference is titled Making Your Company a Magnet for a Diverse Workforce. It'll focus on how employers can make diversity, equity, and inclusion a foundation of the hiring process and follow through on their commitments to DEI efforts. We have some complimentary VIP tickets available for those who've joined today's webinar. It's a nice opportunity since the regular price of our conference tickets is $149. This link will give you a free VIP ticket for the whole event, and you'll find a link for that in the chat space as well. I hope we'll see you there next week. Today, we'll be exploring the topic, focusing on skills rather than jobs to meet future workforce needs. So to create better matches between employees and work, companies need to focus on the skills that employees will need in future roles. How can employers anticipate those skills, identify adjacent ones, and use technology to align employees with opportunities for upskilling and reskilling? What are the best ways to anticipate future roles so that career paths and succession plans can be put into place? Today's webinar is presented with support from Eightfold. I'll tell you a little bit about them. Eightfold AI's market-leading talent intelligence platform helps organizations retain top performers, upskill and reskill their workforce, recruit talent efficiently, and reach diversity goals. Eightfold's patented deep learning artificial intelligence platform is available in more than 100 countries and 20 languages, enabling cutting-edge enterprises to transform their talent into a competitive advantage. Now, a few quick logistical items. This webinar is being recorded, and it'll be available on demand soon after the event. So you can look out for an email in about 24 hours with that link. That same email will have info on how you can get professional development credits for this session from both the Society of Human Resource Management and the HR Certification Institute. And you can look out for a written account of the conversation on our website at fromday1.co. Around 45 minutes into the webinar, we'll have a Q&A session. You can submit your questions anytime they occur to you using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So our moderator for today's discussion is Lydia Dishman. Lydia is Fast Company's senior editor for growth and engagement. She's also written for publications such as CBS Money Watch, Fortune, The Guardian, Popular Science, and the New York Times, among others. Okay, with that, Lydia, over to you.
Thank you so much, Steve, and thanks everyone for joining us today. We are grateful that you've chosen to spend your hour with us. We know how precious time is. I was thinking that a lot of the jobs that we do today really didn't exist 10 years ago, or if they did, they weren't quite what you see now. And this morning in my inbox, I found a brand new report from Randstad Sourcelight, and it was talking about the top skills for employees right now. And among them, there was artificial intelligence and machine learning, business intelligence, data viz, cybersecurity. But alongside that, there were some old favorites like customer service, sales, and financial management. And so we can see that some of the things on that list would be responsible for a skills gap of sorts. And that goes across the workforce and across industries. I mean, you've likely also heard that there's a business case for reskilling and upskilling. But in case you need some stats, LinkedIn Learning's recent report found that companies that develop their people and give them opportunities for internal mobility retain them for an average of 5.4 years, as opposed to the average retention rate of 2.9 years at other organizations. That report went on to highlight the fact that career development and skill building provides a consistent and reliable reason for employees to care about, remember, and apply those new skills that they learned. So all of this to say that it falls on the shoulders of our friends in HR and learning and development to anticipate what skills workers are going to need next and provide a culture of continuous learning. So here to unpack some best practices are these 4 professionals who sit at the intersection of these business imperatives. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves briefly and also tell us a skill that you've developed that you wouldn't have thought you needed at the start of your career. Carly, I'm going to come to you first.
Awesome. Thank you. As you mentioned, my name is Carly Ackerman. I am the Director of Customer Experience for Strategic and Partnership Accounts at Eightfold. And as was mentioned at the top of the call, Eightfold is an AI-enabled talent intelligence platform, and we support individuals and organizations in finding the right roles for the right people based on skills and potential. So super excited about today's topic. I don't think I have any skills that I didn't expect. But what I'm most surprised about now is how much the skills that I built during the 5 years I spent in public education at the very beginning of my career are still so vitally important now. And they are definitely not cybersecurity and AI. They're really,
are you sure about that?
They're really more of those interpersonal human skills. I think I'm really excited to hear how those themes come out through the conversation today.
Great. Thank you very much. Jed, how about you go next?
So I'm Jed Davis with the NCH Corporation. We're headquartered in Irving, Texas, just left of Dallas, Texas. And we are a company that provides maintenance solutions in a variety of contexts around the globe, over 50 countries, areas like water treatment, heavy machine lubrication, life sciences. I guess the skill that I was really surprised by was how much I had to learn about technology. You focus on people and talent, and I spend more time partnering with IT than I ever imagined. So that's been a new one for me.
Good one. Carmen, how about you go next?
Hello, everyone. I'm Carmen Canales, and I'm the Chief People and Belonging Officer at Novant Health, a multi-site health system based in North Carolina. And like Carly, I would say that these skills aren't a surprise to me, and I share them and say that I use them daily, which really are 2: financial acumen and storytelling, specifically the ability to tell a story crisply to an audience of all different backgrounds, even at the leader level and at the executive level, always with math and with statistics. My background as a journalism major helps with this. But that is, you see how much the work, sometimes while the work is important, it's really how you convey the message that will help the thing move forth or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yay for journalism majors. That was me too. Last but not least, Shashank.
Hi everyone, I'm Shashank Bhushan, and I am the Chief Architect for Talent Programs and VP HR for BMC Software. Been here for about 12 years. 10 years of them were as head of HR and the CEO for the BMC India operations. Well, hard to say, what's the learning that I've had over the last 25 years or what becomes a newer skill. I would say when I graduated, I thought I've studied it all and I know it all, like all of us when we are young, and never realized that learning is a process that will really never end. And, and I happen to now be in a role where I'm designing how people will learn in the organization. So that's very interesting because now I can relate with, as a 22-year-old, when I started off versus what I do today, has a lot of synergy.
Well, I have to chime in here as well because I would never thought that I would have used sales in a journalism job, but like Carmen, I feel like the way that you're packaging the message is really the important thing, and you have to know your audience and how to sell that story. So I think sales is a very foundational skill for any industry. But while we're talking about desirable skills, Carly, I want to come to you to give us some context. I know that I mentioned some top skills at the top of this program. What are you seeing as the most desirable skills right now?
This is going to be the famous consulting response, but it depends. And it's going to depend upon industry. It's going to depend upon functional area, business unit. I think what's most exciting about where we are today is that we now have the technology at our fingertips where we can drill down to the level of what are the most important skills. I don't think 10 years ago we would have had a good answer for that. We certainly wouldn't have had a study hitting your inbox on a random Tuesday telling you what the top skills are.
But it's also helpful.
Yeah. And it's really incredible the amount of data that we've been sharing, capturing, aggregating across so many different resources. We can scrape publicly available data and start to understand the shape of where there's some real skills penetration within different industries and different businesses. So I think the actual secret sauce of the most important skills is less about understanding the most important skills of today, November 1st, 2022, and understanding the adjacent skills that are related to that. So I think it's becoming increasingly important for us to be able to evaluate the likelihood of an individual with the skills of today to be able to reskill or upskill successfully and apply those skills that they have today to a new context tomorrow, because the work is just changing so rapidly. So I would make a plug for, certainly understand the most top in-demand skills of today, but make sure you're prepared to understand those skills adjacencies so that you can really help yourself and your people, depending upon the role you're sitting in, to be prepared for whatever the next set of top skills might be.
Well, so let's dig a little deeper, and I'm going to ask the other panelists. Let's do a little bit of a round robin here. So you want to know what the desirable skills are. You want to know what the adjacent skills are. Where do you start measuring what you need and how that aligns with business objectives? Carmen?
Sure. So I think that it's important that you look at, why are you there? Why are you there? Why does your organization or company exist? What's the mission? What is the vision? For us, it's quite simple. We are here to serve the patients, and it's like 6 degrees of separation, but really no more than 2. You're either serving the patient or the next level somehow, again, serving the patient. And that really gives us clarity around what are the things that are key. Some of this for us is even speed to market or speed to making sure that the person or their families have what they need in a way that very much honors and appreciates safety and quality and everything else that goes with that. So it becomes pretty straightforward for all of us once you look at what is the desired outcome.
And then are you taking additional steps to, do like tables and charts and so forth? It's like, if you know that you need to serve these patients, like where do you see it next?
Absolutely. And so, we look at all of our roles and look and consider, is there a skills gap, either with our current workforce or with the talent available to come and join us in delivering that? It's been really fascinating during the pandemic, especially to, like all of us, to look at who we have and what are we trying to do. As we have looked at the evolving marketplace and the evolving landscape in terms of who is available and what jobs are they interested in, it's really caused us to go a little bit deeper. So what we may have said was required for a bedside registered nurse, for example, we're seeing that there were duties in that role that could actually be done by other people who don't have an RN license. Even things as simple as taking out the garbage from the room takes time from the clinically talented person there. So we're seeing how we can supplement that differently.
We're going to come back to that because that's an interesting point. But Shashank, talk to me about how you're measuring what you need.
So I think it's been said already by the old adage of saying, what doesn't get measured doesn't get delivered. I think in today's world where the evolution of work is happening so much more rapidly than before, and the skills have become obsolete that much faster. You named a bunch of skills at the beginning of the session here. We know for sure that those skills are not going to be the hot skills 2 years from now. They were not the hot skills 2 years prior to us, right? So what are those skills? What are the building blocks of skills that are going to be the ones that are going to be driving the future are the ones which are extremely relevant. And that makes it that much more important for us to be able to track what we have today, because skills becomes the, almost like the GPS coordinates of your progression in your career journeys. You need to know where you are so as to be able to chart a journey for where you want to head out to. And that journey is almost endless. The goalposts will keep on moving as time progresses.
Are you offering assessments to figure out where people are?
At the moment, we are offering self-assessments, validations with managers, and in key roles, more certifications for validations.
Okay. Jed, what's happening at NCH? How do you measure?
Well, I think this question, of what's trending, how do we measure it, how do we understand what's coming, really is kind of the crux of our conversation. And there's an old maxim in marketing that in order for your content to be relevant, it has to be timely and timeless. And
Very sure.
I don't know about anybody else here, but it's easy to get stuck in a loop where you're reacting instead of anticipating. And you've got relationships, and you go to the business and you say, how can I help you? What are your needs? And they'll tell you, but they're really more likely to talk about what's happening today. What are my problems? How can I fix it? And then by the time you develop those tools and training programs, that problem may not be the most relevant anymore. And so one of the things that we've been focused on is trying to really zero in on some of the timeless skills, those things that we anticipate, that we feel like will help us regardless of the occasion over the next 5 to 10 years. And in doing so, that creates the space and also the credibility and the trust to talk about what's on the horizon and do a better job partnering with our businesses.
Are you looking externally for ways to assess what's coming and what's needed?
Absolutely. I mean, we've got to look at the opportunities and the threats that are out there and weigh those against, our current measurement of those skills that we feel like are supposed to carry us forward. And I liked, what Carly said about the adjacent skills. A lot of times it's pivoting. It's taking a skill that might be a timeless skill and pivoting that into a future need. How do we make an adjustment that helps us leverage something that we already have?
Right. And you were talking about, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was just going to add, Lydia, that I think this has been a great opportunity to see that not everybody has to excel in everything. Sometimes we talk about this sort of dated view of being well-rounded. Not necessarily. This is it's a great opportunity for us to focus on celebrating people's strengths and having them be good at the thing, that we hired them for, or the role that they're in at the moment, and really supplementing your workforce with appropriate talent for different roles and different things at hand.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to the argument of, do you want a specialist on your team or a generalist? And I think that there's a case to be made for each type of person. Carly, you're nodding your head. Chime in here.
Yeah, and I want to go back to the title of our session, right? Focusing on skills rather than jobs. And I think that's a huge trend that we're seeing and hearing in the research right now. Specialist versus generalist really boils down to what is the work that needs to get done.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really interesting thought experiment to think about work outside of the confines of a job description. I think we all get very hung up in our job descriptions, right? But at the end of the day, we get into the role, and there's nary a day that I can reference back to my job description and say, yep, check the box on all of those things, right? So I think we're going to see more organizations thinking more deeply about the work that needs to get done. And I think Carmen used the perfect word earlier, the outcomes that the organization is trying to drive, because that is what's going to help you create your roadmap for where you are today and where you need to get to from a skills perspective to drive those outcomes and to deliver that value that you want to drive.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned job description, because I was thinking about that in terms of, that's step one for any employer when they're hiring. you've got your job description. It lists a certain menu of skills, if you will. And Carly, you rightly pointed out that oftentimes the day-to-day deviates sometimes pretty greatly from what's in those job descriptions. Do we need to reassess job descriptions for putting forth skills, or should we leave them as amorphous as they are? Anyone can answer this, so please.
I think
No,
you know where I
I think there's
stand.
Go ahead, Shashank.
Yeah, I think there's a strong case for us to relook at the way we structure our job description in the first place. You know, the traditional way has been there's a certain job role and there's a standard job description. And now that we have these, ATSs and they capture all of that information. So, you have open rec that opens up and bang, you get a particular job description. So managers tweak them a little bit here and there. But what usually happens is when the hiring managers are filling up these requisitions, they're looking at the skills, likely what they already have in their groups. So we do not have a very sound methodology of forecasting and saying, what are the evolution of the skills that we are really looking for? So I lost a guy and I'm now backfilling that position. Do I really need to backfill that position with the same set of skills that we had in the past? Or do I need to look in the future and say, this is what I really need? And that's a constant struggle because sometimes at a first or second line manager level, there's lack of clarity on what is required from a future perspective. So there's a whole lot of re-engineering that we need to do around this space of how a job description is constructed in the first place.
I think we also have a chance to look at just really getting over ourselves a little bit as employers. I'm so excited that the talent market has flipped, that, you know, the talent is in charge. And so things that, Shashank is mentioning may have been required. If you can open your mind to operating in a virtual world, if your industry allows that, then that itself could change the job descriptions or our approach to really embracing our talent instead of sort of dictating, what we're expecting.
Jed, you wanted to add?
Well, I agree with everything that's been said. Taking an approach to job descriptions that is unboxed instead of boxed. We're also, you're trying to recognize the skill sets that maybe people that you're hiring are bringing into the organization that you didn't think really fit with what they were doing. And so how does that, empower them or equip them to take on new roles and responsibilities that may be emerging?
Carmen, you had alluded to that when you were talking about the worker shortages in healthcare and how you can use, as Carly was saying, adjacent skills. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So, at least in our industry in healthcare, what we've seen is that, hospitals, systems really take such pride and attention to taking great care of the patient. Of course, we want to send in the most skilled professionals at every level. But literally, when there is a talent shortage, you have to get really creative. And so for us, it's posed an opportunity at Novant Health to think about how do we use technology to supplement people, not to replace people, but are there duties that can be automated that we may not have imagined how they could be? They can be. Even translating can happen on the iPad on the stick that kind of rolls around. It's fascinating. We also are taking advantage of predictive staffing tools so that we can be a little bit more precise about staffing and understanding where are our peaks likely to be. And then it's an opportunity to even think beyond, I would say beyond our borders, to consider international hiring, to understand what is the work involved in operating in a different footprint that you may have operated in. And, making a conscious decision, is this something we want to embark upon? And if so, let's do it, because there's a whole wealth of talent out there in the world beyond where you may currently be operating. And then in addition, it's really using people in what we call at the top of their license. And so again, an RN really doing RN things, a registered nurse doing registered nurse things, and us looking at what other roles are still fulfilling and exciting and important that don't quite require that level of education or experience.
I think that's an important point, is the education and experience, because I know that there is slowly, but still shifting towards employers not requiring a 4-year degree or not requiring a certain number of years of experience to broaden the talent pool and just focus on the skills. And I'm wondering what you all think it's going to take to get that notion more widely adopted.
I think that is already happening now. In most, I come from the technology industry, where 4-year engineering and most postgraduate studies were considered very, very important. Maybe a decade back, we used to look at the scores and marks obtained by kids coming in to say, this qualifies, it does not qualify. I think that is already changing, because now the focus is become, does this person represent the skills that are required? And more importantly, and I think the other shift that has happened over the last, and I see that more pronounced now over the last 5 or 6 years, is the power skills or the softer skills have become that much more important. While the technology skills are very, very important and crucial, I think it is understood if the person has the ability to adapt, there's resilience, there is ability to persevere. Those skills, the technology skills, can be learned, and they die off, or they migrate into some other alternative skills, the adjacency that we talked about earlier, rather quickly today. So I think that the shift is already taking place. We are no longer talking about, and the workforce is becoming younger. What used to get done by a 10-year programmer 5-6 years back is now being done by about 5 or 6 years experience. So I think that those notions about experiences, etc., are already probably much lesser than what it used to be.
I'm glad you mentioned soft skills. And I do think that those are extremely transferable and certainly is potentially predictive of success for someone in a role. However, not always so easy to teach as hard skills. So while we're talking about skills, let's talk about developing skills. And what does it take to develop soft skills? What are some ways that you all are taking care of that part of it?
I'll just mention that I don't call them soft skills. I appreciate that many people do. That's something that I hope, collectively we can start conversations about.
Oh, I'm ready for a new word. Do tell, please.
Right. Because what is more important than the skills around interacting with your team members, with, with the people you serve, with your clients, customers, whatever you call them. In fact, we have, how many of us have worked with folks who really technically had all of the qualities needed, but in terms of making it work in the workplace, it just wasn't working out, right? And so, how do you do that? One of the things simply is acknowledging how many people are just overloaded and burned out. And so if this is something important, I think that as employers, you make space for it, you make time for it, rather than sort of just providing a huge menu of these are all the things you could do. Yeah, there might be a curriculum, it might be a multi-year plan. But I really do think the onus is on the leader, on the department to say, this is important. This is what an expected outcome can be. And this is how we're going to help you make time and succeed at learning this skill. Beyond that, I think there's an opportunity to supplement with tuition assistance or whatever it may be, so that it's something that's equitably accessible to everybody in your workforce.
Good points. Jeff,
I feel.
You wanted to add? Oh, Shashank, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think we exist in pendulums of extremes. At some point in time, we said employees need to take charge of their careers, and they are the only ones accountable to learn and grow themselves, and it's all in your hands. And then there is the expectations from the employees that my company, my organization, my training department is going to do something to enhance my skills. I think the solution is in between. It's where the managers and employees have conversations about what does it take to grow yourself, what are the skills that are relevant, both in the area of power skills or technical skills, and then work together with the plans of how do you upgrade themselves, and keep each other accountable for it, because not everything is in the realm of control of the employees, with so much being expected from them, so much not being part of their job descriptions, yet being expected as normal delivery from them. And then, same standing for the organization, because the organization cannot provide everything that is required by the employee. And learning is becoming a lot more ubiquitous in terms of content all over the internet, everywhere. We are not learning anywhere any longer the way we used to do 5 years back. So I think that ownership now becomes that much more joint between the organization and the employees to make sure that there's learning happening to build skills that are relevant from the future perspective.
Yeah, it's a partnership. Jed, you were going to add?
Well, I was thinking about a story with one of our business units where, several years ago, so pre-pandemic, they decided to really try to solve an old problem, which is conflicts between sales and operations. And so they hired, key personnel into roles to help us do that globally, but really the skills that they were looking for had to do with collaboration. So when you talk about what we typically call soft skills, right? And by the way, my favorite word for that is pivotal skill.
It used to be okay.
It used to be that we talked about those as the differentiator skills, but now it seems like they're all soft skills. So we just call it.
Okay, all right, pivotal skills. Everybody writing this down? We've got a new word. Ding, ding, ding.
but they hired for collaboration, and while it helped solve some of those old problems and kind of grease the wheels there, it also fast forward to all the issues we've had with supply chain. And so because of the collaboration that those individuals brought into the scenario and fostered a culture of collaboration, there was a lot more transparency. And so those groups were able to jump on supply chain problems much more quickly and respond with more people, more ideas, more solutions, whereas before that would have been more siloed. And that's where, and if you look at, the McKinsey & Company study that came out last year, collaboration and partnership, it was at kind of the top of their list of future skills that are needed. And I think we can all attest to how important that is.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Carly.
I'd just like to make a plug for not overcomplicating. I think what what we're hearing from all three leaders is this idea that you probably can't send somebody to a class to learn collaboration, right? There's not going to be a LinkedIn course necessarily where you can take a test and say, I'm now a master of collaborating. I think that there's in terms of what Shashank shared around there needing to be, a push and a pull here from both sides and shared responsibility. I think there's a big component of this in terms of your employment brand. What are you putting out there in the universe in terms of your values, your organizational values? And how are you then, once you attract talent to those values, continuing to reinforce those values on a daily basis? Because oftentimes you'll see behavioral changes, which is where pivotal skills, power skills, human capabilities, whatever we want to call them, you're going to see the outcomes of increased proficiency, I'll call it, in those areas being demonstrated in terms of real behaviors. And you can point that back to the types of corporate values that you are espousing. So I think in terms of the responsibility of the organization, be the organization that you want to see in the world. And you will attract the type of people who bring the skill sets, the human skills that you're looking for.
Well, and so it's true that there isn't necessarily a course on collaboration, although there may very well be. I haven't done a deep dive on LinkedIn Learning, in the last week or so. So I don't want to speak out of turn, but I'm just thinking in general, how are we delivering skills training now? I remember having a similar conversation with a group of leaders on a webinar last year. And everyone was talking about how there was this unexpected benefit to doing trainings virtually. And now that we're sort of in this weird, limbo land where everyone's still trying to figure out where they're going to be, when they're going to be, what are you all seeing as best practices to deliver upskilling?
I can comment on one change that we've made that's been really significant, and that's empowering both the learner and the people that work with the learner to notice more. The concept of noticing, and that's been a real challenge virtually. If we're not around each other, it's harder to notice how is this person getting better at that. And so it starts with empowering the learner, and then helping managers and supervisors and people that are training those folks to understand how can you notice and help kind of reinforce micro improvements Because if we're not around each other every day, then we're looking out to a week or a month where we're reviewing skill growth, and well, you've missed it. It's too late.
I want to come back to that, but I want to give everyone a chance to weigh in. Best practice.
We're looking at things that are mobile optimized. So meaning not just virtual, not desktop, whatever, but more consumable and understandable even from your phone. Quite honestly, taking a lesson from TikTok, I know that scares everybody.
No, I love it.
Short sound bites, how can you consume something? And then in our industry, it's also about partnering with academic institutions to inform the curriculum rather than just receiving or signing up for what they have to offer, really looking at a partnership so that we can design something that makes sense for people who ultimately we hope will come to work with us.
Shashank?
We have gone back to a classical method of looking at learning, which is 70-20-10 model, seeing 70% of learning actually happens on the job. And to point that Jed made, I think we're not complementing the technology platform that is available with us, that when people upskill themselves, they have the ability to seek formal feedback from not only their managers, because managers may sometimes not notice what improvements you've had. And that's, that was in the conventional older world where managers had the line of sight. Today, managers do not have that much oversight. But a lot of other people with whom people collaborate and work globally have better knowledge about how you're improving your skills. So getting their feedback in becomes that much more important. And the second piece, which is 20% of learning, is through exposure. Participating in gig projects, the ability to work across cross-functional team, build upon your adjacent skills. Those are, I think, are far impactful ways of learning, which is retained by people, versus the remaining 10%, which of course is important, which is formal training, and which you could do, which we do, from a classroom to an electronic or mobile, whichever way we can do today. But the retention of the learning and the skill seems to happen a lot more in the first two than it happens on the third, which is pure play training, unless it's so. So that's something that we are trying to do here at BNC.
And I'm really happy to hear Shashank use the word learning and training as two separate things.
Oh, absolutely.
I think in my previous
They are
life,
two separate things.
yes. So in my previous life in learning and development consulting, I used to, if you can't tell, I like to use a little bit of humor, but training for me was a 4-letter word as an L&D professional. The idea that training would be the be all end all of somebody's entire learning experience is a little scary for me. So I think to the extent that you can personalize learning by incorporating a variety of different experiences, I heard, project opportunities, also things like getting coaching and mentoring from somebody. Those are learning experiences, and perhaps they don't count towards your grade at the end of the year from a professional development perspective. But those are definitely should be considered part of the overarching syllabus of your participating in learning experiences as an individual.
Yeah, I started to call training as hygiene factors. Its absence is noticed, but its presence does not really make a huge impact on the ability for people to build their skills. It's outside of that.
Well, so then there's the subsequent question is, how do you know? I mean, Jed, you mentioned like this notion of noticing and awareness. And I know that Carly, you bring out a really good point where it's a little bit squishy sometimes. It's not necessarily from a training module. It's not from a textbook or a certification course. So how do you measure if it worked?
Well, I think, we have to move beyond our systems and tools on that. And we have to talk to the people that are actually doing the work. And that's where we spend a lot of time with follow-up with learners, is that it's not, especially because of, work from home, it's not something that we want to digitize. It's not something that we want to automate. If we're going to prioritize, we make it something we're engaging in live conversations, and we're finding out, from people, you went through this program, talk to us about where you made progress. Tell us a story. Carmen was talking about telling stories earlier. Tell us
Yeah.
a story of where you had success this week, and what did you do, or how did you apply the learning or the training to the learning so that you could have some success. And really trying to focus people more on positive growth in those conversations than on gaps. And so we find that people are more motivated to attend those sessions and have those conversations when we focus on positive growth. And there seems to be kind of a snowball effect that happens when we share that back with their teams and their managers.
We have, we have scorecards for everything, and that's what it is in an industry that's regulated. And, what we all would have in common is looking at revenue. Sometimes, you hear everybody's doing great, everybody's whatever's your highest rating. Well, if you are, is that literally translating into results for the organization? So we look at all of those typical metrics. Again, in healthcare, we're going to look at, serious safety events, about anything related to literally how did the procedure go? Did we follow all of the checklists and steps required? But then beyond that, in terms of some of what I think you were speaking to, Jed, is engagement survey results. How do people feel about what they just experienced? Is it sticking? Do they themselves find it valuable? Do people see it as an investment in themselves and not just in the company?
Very important.
Yeah, I think, measurements have always been tricky in the area of learning, and I come from software industry where, two different programmers will write code very differently, the same outcome. Some will take 2 hours, others will take 5 hours. And so it's very hard to say who's skilled more, right? So it's always been fuzzy whether, this learning had an impact on the actual development or not. But overall, the ability of the organization to be able to gauge through the experiences of the people become that much more important. So the conversations within the organization, feedback programs, surveys, and of course, how well people's performance goals are getting intermeshed with their development plans, and the performance level showing improvements or not. Determines whether you're actually having success with the learning.
We have a number of questions. Our attendees are very lively today. Thank you all. We can't see you, but we know you're there. And I'm going to flip over to some of these questions because they're really great ones. The first one being, how do you go about making time and space for workers to learn new skills in addition to their current workload?
Well, I was invited to be pithy and not cheeky, hopefully. But again, I think you need to revisit the current workload. You've got to make space, and this shouldn't all feel like a burdensome extra thing. And I think that can be a partnership. It's fascinating what you can find out when you ask people about themselves. So, the best suggestion may come from the person saying, well, I'm spending, 45 minutes a day on something that I wonder why I'm doing it. So maybe that's an opportunity to repurpose that for an investment in the person.
Well, I would say, maybe I'll talk from both sides of my mouth on this. One is, it is the development of people, your own development. The nature of work itself has changed significantly. We are no longer working 9 to 5, which means there's so much flexibility that you have to adjust your work with your life. And if learning or building your skills for the future are the fuels for your own career, you find time for it. We find time to watch Netflix, right? Despite being so busy. Why would we find time for learning? And that we need to make special spaces for them. I think it's to each their own. Some people block calendar time. Some people just do it in bites, 5 minutes here, 15 minutes there. Some people go sit in a class. But I think it's unfair to ask the organization or others to say, how do I make time for it? You always make time for things which are important and relevant.
Well, I think that's the real point. It comes back to prioritization. And that means partnering, Carmen's comment about looking at the workload. I mean, that means partnering with business leaders to make it a priority so that they're helping to create that space and that time. And it kind of rolls back on the question we just talked about, measuring. How good of a job are we doing at measuring how that skill growth is impacting real results? And if we're not doing that, we may be even focused on the wrong things. If we can't see there's a line between this activity and this outcome, and then these are the skills that support that, we could be focused in the wrong areas. So if we can measure that, if we can demonstrate those connections, then business leaders are more likely to support creating time and space for work skill improvement. One of the things that we had this last year and that I was really thankful for in one of our business units is a president said, I want to create some space and time, for all of our leaders and all of our managers, to reflect on how they've grown and how they intend to grow. And it was a commitment to development and a recognition, especially in our current talent culture, that if we're not engaging the leaders in our organizations, then they're not going to be able to engage their people.
And if all else fails, there's always TikTok. Carmen, you weren't the only one to say that. Actually, I had a conversation as a From Day One webinar yesterday with Angela Santone of AT&T, and she too was saying that they were delivering some learning modules on TikTok. So that may be the way. and to Shashank's point about we make time for Netflix. Well, we know that people are making time for TikTok, so might as well just deliver it where people are getting their other information. Okay, so moving on to another question. If you're looking at fairly new skills, is it better to create an L&D capability in-house or seek outside experts? What are the pros and cons of each? Who wants to take this one?
I don't think there's going to be a single approach.
Okay.
Again, borrowing from what Carly said in the opening, it depends on on how quickly can you build that skill in-house versus you could go outside, bring that kind of skill or talent within, and then grow other skills around them. I don't think there's going to be one answer for that.
I think in some ways it depends on how critical the tailoring of the training and learning program has to be. In other words, how specific to your world and your scenarios do you need that to be? I think a lot of times when you go externally, that's hard to do. It takes more time to bring people in and help them understand your context. But it's time and work and resources internally to do that as well.
I agree, Jed. I mean, I would urge people not to spend time customizing something that doesn't need to be customized. So much really can be off the shelf. Your industry, your place is not so different that 90% of what needs to be learned you couldn't get elsewhere.
Okay. With respect to hiring and recruitment, can a candidate's soft skills offset gaps in more technical or hard skills that other candidates may have more proficiency with? Well, now we're getting into the interview. Carly, what did you start here?
I mean, I'll just share an example. I have, one role that is very specifically just satisfy the customer. Everybody who calls in is going to be upset about something. Your job is charm offensive, leave them the person at least feeling heard. Does not matter to me if this person can do math or do a whole host of other things, but there aren't, 30 jobs like that on the teams. And so that where I say it depends is it really, I think like we've all been saying, it depends on the outcome needed.
I also think it depends on the I'm going to use pivot skills. Yes. The pivot skills of the person who is being hired. I think another person who we could probably point back to 100 times in this conversation is Carol Dweck and the idea of mindset, right? If one of those skills is growth mindset, there are a few limitations to what that person can do. Obviously, they're not going to go from entry level to surgeon overnight. But I think that that's really important consideration when you're looking at somebody's host of pivot skills in relation to a role that might require some more technical expertise.
What patterns are you seeing among early career workers in terms of their skill strengths and skill gaps? Anybody want to go there besides, ability to use TikTok? That was very ageist of me. Forgive me, all of you out there who are, 2 years or under. I feel you. It has not been an easy 2 years to be a first-time employee.
Well,
Go ahead, Jen.
I'm just going to say I'm going to go against the common intuition on this. I think, in the last decade, we've been caught up, on, throwing our hands up in there and saying all these people that are coming in the workforce and they don't have social skills and, they grew up on their phones, but that's not true. We've found that, selecting for the right people and onboarding, and we find that people have a lot more social maturity than we would give them credit for. And I think that's hopefully everybody's learning that.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't agree more. I think that there could be an inclination that we might all have a negative view of that, but I would say, my gosh, what a group of folks who are resilient.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm experiencing is people who are really self-starters because they've had to be.
Yeah.
Yes.
But natural built-in opportunities for connection weren't there. In terms of the gaps portion of the question, I think it's things that you might naturally just learn on the job in terms of mentoring. That's harder to do virtually or harder to do when you've started in a non-traditional way.
Yeah, I would say that one of the things that we see is a lot of ambition also, and that was something else that I think maybe goes against the grain. People that are eager to learn, which is great.
Yeah, there's the growth mindset again. Absolutely. And you can go very far just with that natural intellectual curiosity. Because if you don't know the answer, you're more inclined to go and find it yourself. And that self-starterness is really, I think, critical for new career people. Okay, so we have the flip side of one of the previous questions. What if the employee feels learning is important, but their leader feels their time should be better spent elsewhere? People make time for what gets them paid and keeps them employed. So here's the culture question for you.
Yeah, that guy's not going to stay around for too long. I think the middle path of finding the sweet spot is in having conversations and enablement, and not in enforcement. Neither can learning be enforced, nor can it be restricted. So if an employee is aspirant for learning, he or she is going to find ways of doing so in this organization or another one. So, and I think the choices that employees have today are far more than it was before. So I would be very cautious here to the leader who doesn't support active learning.
I'll add to that, Shashank. I think that it's an opportunity to have a balanced view. It's important for the leader and the employee to have collaboration, and I think some clarity up front about what's reasonable. Because how many of us have had that coworker who was always away because they were in a class, in a virtual class, because they love learning so much, but their day job wasn't getting done. And so I support balance in the approach.
Wise, definitely. Carly?
Yeah, I wanted to steal Carmen's answer earlier, about 5 questions ago, when she basically said, look at the revenue, right? And
yes.
Part of the question was, people are motivated by getting their work done so that they can get paid. As that work evolves, you are inevitably going to have to learn something new in order to deliver whatever it is that you're expected to deliver to get paid. So I agree with Shashank. It's a little short-sighted to say, I only want you focusing on the work at hand, because the work at hand today is very different from the work at hand tomorrow.
Yeah, for sure. And variation on that theme, what skills or cluster of skills do you see increasing or decreasing importance specifically for people leaders?
I'll just start with something around sort of intercultural, multicultural skills. As the talent landscape well, I would say as it changes in this country, it doesn't necessarily need to change in other places, because in some cases they're quite more used to people from all over the place, in other places. But as the makeup of talent in your organization changes, we really need leaders who can keep up with that, who can get ahead of it, who can really be goodwill ambassadors and make sure that we're getting the best of everybody.
Absolutely.
I think what we have always called those, ability to have those crucial conversations are, evergreen requirements of leadership skills that are required for leaders today. They're always in context to the culture, they are in context to the time, and being able to have those candid conversations with people. And now in current context where the newer generation of employees do ask a whole lot of questions, which the older generation of leadership may not be very comfortable with. Being able to respond to that and not take offense, it's not a skill. I think it's a trait that needs to be built on that much more in leaders today.
I would say it may sound a little cliche, but I think it's putting people first, which taps into, understanding, diversity and being more aware, more self-aware, not making assumptions. Earlier, Carly talked about values, trying to find common values and connect those to the work values, getting to know people. We've had the most success with leaders who their employees and their associates felt like they really cared about them, and valued them, not as a piece of the machinery, but as a real person. And so I think just, especially in the digital age, just more and more connection and getting to know people.
There's been a lot of really interesting research lately, and I'll point folks to the Josh Burson Company for this one. Lots of interesting data suggesting that employees are picturing their organization as a social safety net, and really valuing the ability and demonstration of their organization to react quickly and effectively in times of crisis. So I couldn't agree more with what's been shared, that leadership needs to exude that type of empathy to understand the context in which everybody is existing right now. And it's very different for very different individuals, depending upon where you're located, your family situation. So I think it boils down to having the empathy needed to be able to interact and understand folks who are bringing different contexts and looking for that type of support.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one more. What help is available for employers who really have challenges pinpointing skill gaps in their current employees?
I think there are a lot of technology solutions available now that help you understand what those gaps are and and more importantly, how do you fill those gaps? It's not that in the past we didn't know, what are the gaps. We just did not know how to fulfill them and where to fulfill them. I think those solutions are a lot more easily available with the advent of AI and machine learning and so on and so forth, which is extremely and the other fact that the learning content has become ubiquitous is that another.
I obviously could not agree more that there's lots of technology out there.
I was waiting for that.
That said, it's a big investment. So I think there's, the other piece of this is it's a lot of work, but doing your homework, right? AI and machine learning are nothing without the data that feeds it.
Yes.
Seek the data. It's out there. There's so much of it publicly available. You could probably do a Google search of your own organization against your industry and get some very rough benchmarks. But obviously there are technologies that can accelerate some of that manual work that would otherwise need to be done to understand where you are today and what the gap is with some of your competition.
Yeah. Well,
Absolutely.
on that note, we just have about a minute left. So I am going to take the time to tell everyone in the audience, if you did not get your questions answered, because there were so many, please feel free to reach out to these wonderful people on LinkedIn or via their organization's website to get more information. And I personally want to thank you all, Jed, Carly, Carmen, and Shashank, for spending time with me. This has been a great discussion. I feel like you all have been very aligned and we've had a great time. So thank you.
Well, thank you to Lydia. Thank you for superbly leading this conversation. I think pivotal skills, I think a new term may have been coined today. We're all doing a lot of pivoting, so that is probably a concept that's going to stick. Thank you, Carmen, Shashank, Carly, and Jed for being here. Thank you again to Eightfold for their support and to all of our attendees for participating today. Before you leave and sign off, we again invite you to complete the family caregiving survey we developed with AARP to develop more data about how employers are supporting workers with family caregiving responsibilities. You'll find a link to that survey in the chat space in case you missed it earlier. And finally, if you'd like to join us for more virtual programming, head to our website fromday1.co and check out more of our upcoming events. Our November virtual conference is taking place next week on November 9th. It's titled Making Your Company a Magnet for a Diverse Workforce. That link will be in the chat space as well. So we're looking forward to that conference. I hope we'll see you there. On behalf of my colleagues at From Day One, thanks everyone, and stay well. Bye for now.